It sounds like those negotiations are getting ugly. I mean, it's gone to the press, and guys like Dregs and others are reporting, and Dregs spoke to Pietrangelo, and it sounds like the Blues are offering, about what, 7.5, 7.7 a year, give or take, and don't want to give up an inch in terms of how the contract is structured. In other words, I would assume bonus money, maybe even no trade, no movement. I wouldn't be shocked if they were looking at a guy who's 31 and said, we can't give you a no movement. Like, we might have to trade you in a couple of years. And as a result, maybe he's going to be available in a couple of weeks come free agent frenzy. And I guess the bar is set at 7.7, and that's a team that knows him and I presume loves him in St. Louis, and they've decided that's where we calculated your worth. Doesn't mean it can't change.
No, that's
now
the
that it's
hometown
gone public,
discount.
it might.
That's to me, honestly, Brian, sorry to interrupt. Like, to me, that's the home. Like, we want you at 7.7, but maybe we can. Let's round it up to 8.
Yeah.
Let's say $8 million in St. Louis. Let's see what you can get on the free agent market. So, people that are tying him to Toronto, he's not getting just $8 million to come to Toronto. Like, he can get that in St. Louis. He's going to have to get more for any of these teams for him to go on there, because I think if push came to shove, they could get $8 million out of St. Louis.
Yes, I agree with you. I would think 8 by 8. I would think. I mean, the length of the
like
deal.
I
haven't seen any reports on it, but maybe it's a 6-year deal in St. Louis, 7. Who knows?
Right.
And you're right. I think if you're at 7.7, you're not going to lose a guy over $300,000 who's that important to you, your captain, et cetera. It's basically 8. They're basically saying we see you around 8, which means for him to really want to leave, he feels either disrespected by that, so he's willing to take almost anything else because screw you guys, look what I've done for you, I'm gone. If you're willing to treat me this way, which would not be the first athlete to ever do that. It wouldn't be the first guy to say, really? I'm your guy, I'm your captain, I won you a cup for the first time in 40 years, and you're going to lowball me?
Take less somewhere else just to piss them off because they're pissed off.
The emotions, you know how it works in negotiations. We've all been through them in different capacities. It gets emotional. So that is one angle. On the flip side, it's, okay, if you are looking simply for money, how high can you really go if your other teams in the league, with the cap structure being what it is, COVID having a serious impact on the next 2 or 3 years at a minimum, 31 years old, and his own team is telling you it's 8. Like, I don't know if you can give him 10.5 now. Like, that would look incredibly desperate.
Yeah, no.
Like, if you really want him and you have to give him 10.5 and you have that much space, I guess you can. The Leafs can't.
Those deals, 10.5, those Doughty deals and those Carlson deals, those things were done in an hour, or maybe not an hour, but those were knowing the team was giving them that money right away. If they're not going to whatever 8, they're not going to 10.5.
Well, you're right, because it seemed like, again, I'm not privy to that information, but it seemed like the marketplace was already set for those players. Doughty's going to get 11. Carlson's going to get 11. What is the marketplace for Alex Pietrangelo? Like, his agency, I think, would know some of it. I mean, obviously St. Louis believes it's 8. But
don't you think he got screwed in the timing, too? Like, if his deal was up and he was unrestricted the summer after Doughty, he could have just pulled an Erik Karlsson, could he have? He could have just said, well, then the cup fell into place, but that's what that guy gets, so go ahead. That's what I'm getting. And now he's sitting around, and it's not even really in that ballpark.
Well, COVID's changed everything, and he's older. He'll be 31 when the deal kicks in, when he plays his first game.
I know, but as the player, you always think this, Brian. You're like, I didn't bring COVID around here. I'm not responsible for COVID.
Right.
And you feel like you've been screwed personally. You're like, oh, all of a sudden the gravy train's stopping and it's my turn. It's my turn. You're pissed, man. Well, as soon as the talk of, like, even Roman Yossi's deal, 9.5 or whatever that is. Oh, so that train's over too? And all of a sudden I'm the guy that just won the Stanley Cup and one of the best defensemen in the league, and all of a sudden COVID happens and I gotta what? I pay the price for it? He's probably pissed at that whole notion.
Well, aren't you pissed too that Justin Falk gets a deal and he hadn't played a minute for your team?
That's the King Daddy Topper contract.
Like, that's
the
one
what? He didn't play one game for this organization, and maybe you brought him in as a support valve in case Pietrangelo did leave, but why was that necessary? Why the extension, the whole 9? That one is puzzling to me.
Well, if he hits the market, there's going to be a ton of teams interested. I mean, that goes without saying.
Yeah,
of course, you have to.
Yeah.
He's a at a minimum, he's a top 10 defenseman in the league. He might be a top 5 defenseman or close to it. When he's on his game and he's healthy, he's a right shot defenseman. He's going to eat up a ton of minutes. He's a great player. And there's a lot of teams in this league that would look at that and say, that's what we need, even if we have to move other pieces. But in Toronto, you've already locked in on Matthews, Tavares, and Marner. Those 3 are sticking around at basically 11 to 11.5. That's a huge commitment for 3 guys. You can't. I don't think you can add $9 million on top of that for a 4th guy. I just don't see how that's going to work.
How are you going to fill out a roster with that? Like you're literally. I was talking on Leafs Lunch. You're dumpster diving for every other position player.
Right.
They're basically doing it now. How bad would it be if they bring in another high-priced talent with a massive contract?
Yeah,
you're dumpster diving, man.
I mean, as you guys, I'm sure, saw on the weekend, you saw different names trending on Twitter. So right now it's Marner that's trending on Twitter, and it was Nylander. Well, if you can get Pietrangelo, then trade Nylander. Do all everyone's trying to figure out how Toronto would make it work. I'm certain they could make it work, but are they going to be able to make it work with the vision that they have? And the point being is if they believe that Dermott is a 4. If they believe that, Liljegren's going to be a player, if Sandin's going to be a player, if, Nick Robertson is going to slide into a role that makes Zach Hyman expendable. I'm sure Kyle's laid it all out on a board of what his team's going to look like in the next 3 months, the next 6 months, and the next 4 years. That's the challenge. I think they could make it work, to be honest. I just don't know where the breaking point, where that line is, where it's too top heavy. They already are top heavy.
They're the most top heavy team in the league, by a substantial margin.
Right.
There's no other team that's close that has 3 guys getting paid $11 million. So you're already in that game. There are, of course, ways to do the math, to work it out. And there are ways that you can totally justify, okay, Pietrangelo is clearly going to be more effective than this player or these combination of players. So you move on from them, you bring him in. Maybe you're still at the same kind of number overall, and you're still working from where you're working, only your team's been improved because you brought in a stud like this who helps a position of need. So I can wrap my head around all that. But what I would hope the Leafs have learned from past negotiations is at some point you got to put your stake in the ground, and if you want them, okay, go for them, but set a price and even set a term, because I would be reluctant to go 7 years.
No kidding.
And say, listen, we really like you. You're free. We'll give you 8.5, but it's a 5-year deal loaded with bonuses, full no movement, take it or leave it. They can't continue to be full term, full this, you own us, whatever you want, we're desperate, we need you. You got to stop at some point. Because I've been saying this since the second they signed that Tavares deal. I think they got burned on that. I would have gone to him and said, if you really want to be here, you're the local guy. We'll give you 7, but it's got to be 10. It can't be 11. But it was 11, And then we know what happened with Marner and Nylander and Matthews, and those guys got spectacular contracts. At some point, you can't. It's not EA Sports. It's not a video game. I love that guy, so I'm just going to get him and worry about it later. It's got to be. I love him at this price because that's what St. Louis is doing. And guess what? They won a cup last year, and they're better than you today. So if they're better than you today, and they're telling you 7.7 is the price, it better not be 9.5 in Toronto, or you got duped. It's that easy.
Well, you have to find out, and to me, you have to find out exactly where the player is willing to bend to. What is his? I guess what's his end game? He's probably told his agency, I would like to play here for this amount of money, and figure out they might have a number in mind, and it's not even $10 million a year. It may be I need $50 million over. Get me $50 million. Figure it out how that's going to work, and that's where you have a lot of smart people breaking down the numbers, including if you're the Leafs, that they've got some of the best.
They can make it
guys.
work. Every team in the league can find a way to make everything work. It's just, do you work on a spreadsheet or do you work on the ice? Those are 2 different things. Because this team has worked on the spreadsheet the past couple of years. They found a way to get guys signed and guys worked. What's it done for them? They haven't. They're not good enough yet. They got a lot of great pieces. They're still a playoff team. It's not like they're terrible. They're in the middle of the pack, and they want to take a step up. Now, Pietrangelo, I think, would definitely help that in terms of on the ice. But I think they need even more than that, to fill out the rest of their roster. What are you going to do with your goaltender? What are you going to do with Hyman, who's up in another year and is, I think, an integral part of the puzzle? And, there's always moving parts. So spreadsheet, one thing, ice, another. They got to find a way to make both work, like every other team in the league is trying to do.
Well, and you're right. Like you mentioned it at the starting of this conversation. Toronto won't be the only team looking at him.
Exactly.
No kidding, man.
Like if I'm the Winnipeg Jets, and I know Winnipeg may not be the sexiest of cities, but that's a hell of a team too. Like there's some, you've got a Vezina winning goaltender, and you've got a deep core up front. And Josh
Jamie, that team makes some additions. A guy like Pietrangelo, and they upgrade their second center position. They could put themselves right back into the mix as being one of the contending teams.
That's what I mean. Because you know what? You know who's going to be, I think, available and Winnipeg should be looking at? A guy like Tyler Johnson. When Tampa has to sell off some pieces here in the offseason because Vasilevsky's deal kicks in. Like, to me, there's going to be a lot of musical chairs, a lot of moving parts. But, it comes back to Toronto. Toronto should be looking, but guaranteed there's 5 or 6 other teams that are, calling Petro's representatives going, yeah, we'll take a look and see, what it takes to put him here.
I think every team in the league has to make that call. I mean, how often does a guy of this caliber become available? And he's worth a lot of money in term. I guess he's got a great case to make. But that, different teams have different priorities. Different teams, I think, have different setups. Different teams have different pitches in terms of what he might be looking for. And I think what happened with Tavares was they signed him and they said, we'll figure everything else out. I think when you get in a situation like Pietrangelo, you better have everything else figured out before you sign him. Like, you better know, what does this mean for Riley in 2 years? What does it mean for Hyman? What are we doing, Freddie? Where are we going with this, that, and the other? It can't just be hey, we're so happy we got him, now we'll figure it out. Because that burned them the last time.